I'm reminded of Peterson's answer, right? When people say, "Do you believe in God?" He says, "No, but I act as if he exists." So that
Yeah.
it needs to have
Well, God
practical.
does exist, because even that reconciliation, that can be an example of whatever people's idea of God is. But we know there's going to be a punishment that comes from
Mhm,
withholding the truth, you
mhm.
know.
Yeah.
So on that level, absolutely.
Uh,
And, and and watch the way that your external life manifests as a result of continuing down that path of withholding truth.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the What is Money Show. I am thrilled to have you here joining me on my mission to help shine light on the corruption of money. Now, if this is your first time listening to the What is Money Show, I strongly recommend that you go back to episodes 1 through 9 first, which lays a lot of the groundwork for many of the concepts that we explore on the show. These first 9 episodes are my series with Michael Saylor, and thousands of people have told me that this is the best podcast series they've ever heard, hands down, and that it was instrumental to their understanding of money and Bitcoin. So if you're looking to start a deep dive into the nature of money, I don't think there's any place better that you can start other than episode 1 of this show. Now, a little bit about this show and how it makes money. The What is Money Show is 100% sponsor based. So all of our revenues are derived from direct sponsorships. And I strive to be very selective about the sponsors that I work with, specifically only using sponsors that I use personally, and also choosing sponsors that have values which are well aligned to the values expressed on this show, such as freedom, education, self-sovereignty, etc. So what I'm going to do now is a few ad reads right at the top of the show, and then I'll do a few more ad reads in the middle. And I hope you'll take the time to listen to them, as again, these are hand-selected sponsors, and I think you'll like what they have to offer.
Today's podcast is brought to you by In Wolf's Clothing. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times per year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that help fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. So go to wolfnyc.com to learn more about the program or apply. Again, that's Wolf NYC, WOLFNYC.com. Joe Rafidi, welcome to the What is Money Show.
Robert Breedlove, it's a pleasure to be here with you, man.
Great to have you, man. It's nice to be on the other side of the mic this time. I think I've been on your show once or twice.
Yep.
And always had a really good time, really good conversation. So thought it'd be great to have you on and do some philosophizing.
Absolutely, man. Let's do it.
Just by way of quick introduction, you are the co-host of the Here for the Truth podcast. And you guys put out some really good content. I think asking hard questions, pushing people's critical thinking, getting people to re-examine the nature of the world, themselves, etc. It's really good stuff. So kudos to you for that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Maybe we could just start there, actually. And this
Yeah.
is, like I was saying to you offline, truth, right? It's one of those words that's so obvious. We all know what the truth is, accurate portrayal of reality or, good, valid information, something like that. But when you really start to dig into it, people don't seem to have a consensus on truth very often. So kind of like money in a way, that it's this obvious thing that we all use every day. But then when you really dig into it and try to define the nature of it, it quickly becomes a philosophical conversation. So maybe we just start wrapping on the nature of truth. Obviously, it's the namesake of your show. You've talked to a lot of people about it. How have your views on the essential nature of truth changed in doing the show? And what is truth in your view?
Yeah, man. Again, the podcast could be called What is Truth? Same as What is Money? Like no one really seems to know the answer, but everyone's got their own perspective. Yeah, man, like the podcast is called Here for the Truth. Like it's not we know the truth, it's here for the truth, meaning that, we're open to discovering what that is throughout all our conversations that we have. And then obviously we get into like objective truth, subjective truth, external truth, internal truth. It goes on. But, ultimately, the truth has to be verifiable, right? So objectively, we can go straight into Randism, objectivism. A equals A, the law of existence. I exist as a human being. That's the truth. I'm sitting here having this conversation with you. That's the truth. The things that I can see, I can grasp, external to me, are obviously true. And many people these days tend to want to easily drift from objective truth. And I think that is, very much so connected to the slippery slope we're seeing now all around us, particularly around society with, everyone with the label expert, wanting to proclaim the truth, and we've so easily handed over our own mind's judgment of the truth. So when it comes to truth, we're all unique individuals. And I think first and foremost, the most important thing is that each person has to learn to hold their mind and their judgment of reality alone as the final arbiter of truth. Because we've all had unique experiences. No one's had the same experience. No one's witnessing the same things unfolding. Everyone's perceiving things in their own way. And that's not to say that truth is completely subjective, but truth for an individual is experiential, I believe. Then there's internal truth, like the truth of who we are. The truth who I am is different to who you are. My childhood is different to your childhood. The things that light me up and the things that I'm passionate about are different to the things that light you up and you're passionate about. So, a big part of our podcast is know thyself, self-knowledge. And I think through being a living human being, through having experiences, through having relationships, through being within an environment, we're constantly getting feedback about the truth of who we are. And I think understanding and coming to grips and excavating down towards closer to the truth of who you are is a huge piece of the puzzle in discovering that process of what is truth as well, because we all come in with our own filters, our own programs, our own conditions, our own levels of regulation when it comes to our own nervous system. What one person takes as an attack, some person might take completely differently. So I think also being able to come to a place of regulation within oneself, of balance, of harmony, of equanimity is very important in honing one's discernment of truth. I mean, I'll start the conversation there. Do I have a direct answer? No, but if you've got thoughts on what I've said so far.
Yeah, no, that's really good stuff. What comes up for me there is we perhaps talk about truth sometimes as if it's this static quality, like tell me the truth. What is the truth? Let's get to the truth. Like there's some destination that we just arrive at, like, oh, there it is. Here's the whole truth. But it really seems to be more like this ongoing process of discovery, right? That it depends, right? It depends on what you're looking at, how you're looking at it, what your aims and goals are in relation to the thing that you're observing or interacting with. And it's processual. It's not static. It's dynamic. I'm reminded of too, like the American pragmatist described, who was this? Peirce, maybe, I think was the philosopher. And he said, truth is found at the end of inquiry. And they sort of distinguish pragmatic truth from some capital T transcendent, all-encompassing divine truth, let's say, and which is something that's not necessarily accessible to the human mind, but for normal human purposes, we had these pragmatic truths that we have to work to basically discover all the time, right? There's always a new layer to unveil. And the other thing that came up for me there too is like this whole, what we've seen in the past couple of years, this whole trust the science mantra, where it's, again, as if science were a substitute or a surrogate for truth in a way. And again, like there's just some static entity out there called science that we're just supposed to trust. But again, if you dissect that, like, well, what is science? Science is this methodology of systematic questioning. So you're trusting the process of inquiry. You're not trusting any scientist or any scientific body or even any existing scientific law, because obviously science has been revised many times. So maybe like just shifting your getting people to shift their mind from a static view of reality to something that's more dynamic seems to be more truthful. And that applies too, as you said, to the self, right? Because your self is an ongoing process of discovery, right? Who you are today is not who you were 10 years ago. It's not who you're going to be 10 years from now.
Yeah, there's a great Jung quote where he says, what is true in the morning, in the afternoon will surely become a lie. And that's held very true throughout my life. So many times, I thought I was very certain about the things I knew.
Yes.
Only to have that rug continually pulled under me and realize it is a process. There's always, a process of discovery going on.
Yes. Yeah. I think there's another saying, as this kind of ties into economics and markets, but there's a saying on Wall Street that price is truth.
Mm-hmm.
It's, again, the thing that's always, you're discovering how much people value a thing, like how much the market values a thing. And there's a lot of information in that.
Yeah.
And so as it pertains to like money and the corruption of money, when we counterfeit currency, we're distorting prices. So there's something there, like you're interrupting that process of discovery that is the process of unveiling truth. And then what happens? Well, our world gets awash in bullshit, right? Government gets big, propaganda gets big, mainstream media gets deceptive, psyops are rampant. So there's like a very useful feature, I think, in asking and looking at the nature of truth itself and then seeing how it relates to these discovery processes that we're engaged in all the time, whether it's dialogue or whether it's a pricing system in a marketplace. We need these things to get deeper, to get into relationship with truth, basically.
And it's a matter of, getting hyper real with yourself, the state of your life in all aspects of it, particularly with, many people, I guess, struggling to, I guess, become who they were born to be, to individuate, to develop self-esteem, to live a really meaningful and purposeful life. I think for many, there's like a blur or a veil between them and what's really happening within their existence, and how much responsibility they actually play in that. Many people, psychologically still children, living this hoping, wishing, waiting game, thinking someone's going to come save them. Someone's going to come knock on the door and hand them a miracle and be like, you are special and here's everything you've ever wanted in life. But, until we can really take a stark look at our own realities, our own circumstances, the state of our relationships, our financial situations, etc., and really developing objective truth, at least in that manner, then it's difficult for anyone to develop real change, positive change in their life without the bedrock of truth, So truth on top of all that is also an axiom of self-esteem. Self-esteem merely being your relationship with yourself, how you feel about you, the reputation that you have about with yourself. If we're constantly lying to ourselves, if we're contradicting ourselves, if we're compromising our own ability to reason with little white lies about ourselves and our reality, then no one can build self-esteem on that kind of foundation. And, to me, that correlates to the market as well with the corruption of price. You're corrupting the foundation of prosperity.
Yes. No, that's wonderfully said. Yeah. They're both cognitive processes, right? Like the marketplace is like a collective cognitive process. And then obviously we have that going on in between the ears too. And so when you start deviating from truth, you corrupt the process and then you get bad outcomes, basically, right? You're not going to have, so this came up for me too, as you were saying that I've been listening to some of these relationship podcasts recently, and the power of radical truth in relationship, like people that, whatever, they do something, they're not faithful to their partner, or they do something else they don't like. When people don't reveal that, they keep that hidden from their partners, it creates these very destructive consequences over time. But when people just do the uncomfortable thing up front, right, and just they shoot their partner straight, here's what happened. It's amazing to hear how some of these stories, like people go through a lot of drama, I guess, in relationships. But if they build it on radical truth and they keep telling each other, they keep shooting each other straight, you see these people succeed, right? They have really strong, lasting relationships. And so,
because you're choosing to correct course immediately, and when you don't do that, and when you consciously omit the truth, then that doesn't just go away; it gets hidden, like the unconscious is what we've decided to forget about. Ultimately, it's what we've hidden away, then forgotten where we hid it, so to speak. And
Yes.
psychologically, this is the shadow, right?
Right.
And ultimately, man, it's like it's like a rubber band. The longer you
Yes.
avoid it, the more painful it's going to be when
That's right.
ultimately it comes out, and the longer lasting the consequences are as well. And again, to relate, it's very much so like an economic bubble, so to
Yeah.
speak,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You can deny it for as long as you want, but
Yes.
ultimately, somewhere down the road, there's going to be catastrophe as a result of avoiding the truth in the
Yes.
instance where it should have been confronted.
That's such a great point. I'm reminded. I love this quote. I think about it a lot. I think it was Buddha. I'm not sure. Three things cannot remain long hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth.
Yeah, it is Buddha.
Um,
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson used to describe this as when you tell a lie, you're like twisting the fabric of reality, right? Mm-hmm. And the more you twist it, the more tension is building. And at some point, it's going to snap back. And so the more you've lied or the longer you've lied, the harder that snap is going to be. And this isn't, I really think this is a fundamental property of reality. This is not just something like, oh, karma, you might get caught. Like it's like no. Peterson says in his 25 years of being a clinical psychologist, he's never seen anyone get away with anything ever. Like it always, the truth always comes out. So you have to just acknowledge that reality and have a really frank relationship with it up front. And
it's a law of nature, you know.
Yeah.
And
yes.
You know, as is the other great Hermetic principle, as above, so below, as within, so without. You know, ultimately, the lie that you hold within is going to have external consequences as well, and will manifest itself externally.
Yes.
And before you know it, you're gonna be like trying to tailor your reality to avoid that lie coming out on some unconscious level.
Yes.
And there's no freedom in that. So in fact, when you withhold the truth, you're compromising your own reception of freedom and your own ability to live freely as well.
Yes. Yeah. Your own.
So freedom is truth.
Yes. Right. Because you are free, right? And with that freedom comes responsibility.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's nothing that you're hiding from anymore. You know, you don't. There's no situation that can occur in reality that is going to undo you. Yes. Because there's acceptance there, there's equilibrium there, there's harmony there, and that there's nothing that I have to hide from anyone.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're reconciled to reality.
It's reconciliation. Yeah, that's right.
But if you lie and then you get caught in the lie, you have to tell another lie. You have to keep building these layers of artifice, and at some point, that's going to crumble and collapse. And the taller you build that tower of artifice, the harder you're going to fall, basically.
Oh yeah.
And I just wish religion, I guess, does a good job of this somewhat. It's like lots of religions focus on the truth and telling the truth and all of this, but people, maybe like the materialist worldview, still doesn't take this stuff seriously, in my estimation. Like people think they can lie and get away with things, and it just doesn't work. I mean,
yeah, I hear you, man. I mean, I think religion has its flaws in this regard as well. You know, like I think many people living purely on a faith-based lives is antithetical to truth. I think religion has caused many people to consider this current life, whether there's reincarnation or whatever, as secondary, and many people are merely living their lives for the afterlife, for some unknowable, unquantifiable afterlife. And I think on an unconscious level, they therefore treat this life with some level of disdain, almost like it's secondary, you know? So then again, I think about like metaphysical truths, there's much that we can't really say is a truth when it comes to these ideas of, I'm not saying it's not, of heaven, of God in the heavens, etc., of reincarnation, of all these things. I think people need to be careful with where that fits within their reason. I'm not saying don't let that have any role in your life.
Yeah,
but we need to consider that.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I'm reminded of Peterson's answer, right? When people say, "Do you believe in God?" He says, "No, but I act as if he exists." So it needs to have.
Well, God does exist, because even that reconciliation, that can be an example of whatever people's idea of God is. But we know there's going to be a punishment that comes from withholding the truth. Yeah. So on that level, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's kind of
we're creating our states of heaven and hell through our relationship with truth.
Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, you're almost like your distance from truth is hell, something like that.
Yeah, man. Psychologically, it is.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Uh,
And,
uh,
and and watch the way that your external life manifests as a result of continuing down that path of withholding truth.
Absolutely. Another one that really jumps out at me here is Heidegger described truth as unconcealedness. Um, Aletheia, maybe I think is the ancient word that he sourced it from. But again, this idea of just revealing what is, right? Like, if, living in radical truth with your partners, your colleagues, your family, everyone, just, speaking what's on your heart, what's on your mind, and not trying to conceal. And there's the other quote that, like, lies are sweet in the beginning and then sour later, whereas truth is sour in the beginning but sweet later. Like, it's hard. It never gets, it's simple, I think, to try and live in radical truth because it's a very simple formula, but it's always difficult. Like, there's always these conversations. I'm like, I don't want to have this conversation. I don't want to say this. And you kind of try to rationalize it and fight it a little bit. But in my experience thus far, the more you're willing to actually just get it out, the better life becomes.
Absolutely, man. I think there's always pain involved, and that seems to be something that is also just inherent in the nature of whatever this process that we're all experiencing consciously is.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, the reconciliation is pain, right? It's going to hurt.
yeah,
It's going to hurt, period. But it's going to hurt more if you try to postpone the reconciliation.
yeah, and the moment you postpone it, you're consenting to some kind of illusory existence on some level,
Right.
which is built upon nothingness, which is built upon lies, and
Yes.
it's hard to build anything of true prosperity from that place.
Yes.
So I think, we need to be very vigilant in that regards, in, ensuring that we reconcile, whether it's day to day or whether it's week to week, or
Yes.
whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
And then also like a very practical cost to this, because if you're telling lies or living out of reconciliation, you're consuming more of your own bandwidth or your own cognitive hard drive to try and maintain all that shit. Whereas if you're just telling the truth, I think it was Mark Twain, like, if he who tells the truth doesn't have to remember anything, something like that.
Yeah.
It's like you're
Yeah.
just free and clear mentally, so you're more effective in life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I wish people would take it more seriously. It seems like the
But
Western.
that's part of the thing, man. You can't force anyone on this
Yeah.
journey. You can't force, like, and ultimately it becomes down to each individual, hopefully becoming more consciousness through experiencing life, through making decisions, through getting feedback from their environment, recognizing, this path doesn't work.
Yeah.
This path does feel better. I'm gonna do more of that,
Yeah.
And even like in the nature of what we do in our work, like mass awakening, like I don't think that's a thing. Like I don't think that's coming. This is an individual process
Mm.
for every single person. And so the reality is not everyone might come to these same conclusions, in this life.
Yeah.
But the truth is that that's okay too, because ultimately that is going to be true.
Yeah.
So I think the best you can do, man, is, really, you know, live by these values and these qualities in one's own life, and become a beacon for others to to see as an example of the results, because what we put in ultimately is what we get out, the rule of inputs and outputs. And I think most people that when I look around, like, they don't really have a code for life. They don't really have like a proper morality upon which dictates their decision making process. A lot of it is, loose ends, untied
Right.
conclusions. There's no entire concept of reason or morality that guides them. And I think that's why so many people are lost, to be honest with you. And on top of that, we're being fed inverted moralities constantly. We're the reality out there. The truth is, for the most part, it's filled with lies and illusions and half truths. So, looking externally for that, especially today, is not very beneficial for someone. So I think when someone really looks at the reality of their life, they have to make the decision themselves to be like, okay, the answers aren't right in front of me. I recognize something's wrong. So I need to go seeking. And that's what the truth seeking process is. That's where it begins for most people.
Yeah. Such a good point.
Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, iCoin Technology. iCoin has just released a sleek new hardware wallet. It looks like a mini iPhone, with a little touch screen and camera on it. The device has no Wi-Fi, no cellular connection, no GPS. It's a strictly physically cold hardware wallet. Like I said, it's got a high-res 3-inch touchscreen. It's got a camera for air gapping the wallet. It's got optional Bluetooth compatibility. And it's really a brand new UI, UX experience for a hardware wallet, making it very accessible, easy to use, not intimidating. And as we always talk about on this show, the only way you can truly own your Bitcoin is by having it in self-custody. So you need a device like iCoin Wallet to truly own your Bitcoin. Go to iCointechnology.com today and use promo code Bitcoin23 for 30% off of this new sleek hardware wallet.
That's a good segue too, actually. So you brought up Rand earlier, and I just finished Atlas Shrugged. I did the audiobook, 64 hours, I think. Man, nice. I cannot believe it took me so long to get through that book, but not to get through the book. Obviously it took a long time, but to get to the book. I've been postponing reading it for so long. And it's just it is almost biblical, and it's how profound it is. It's so good. It is so unbelievably good. And
my life's in 2 stages, before and after Atlas Shrugged.
Yes. Yeah. I want to read it again. Like, I want to go through the whole book again now, basically. Highly recommend it. But she lays out, and you're talking about the illusions in the world. I think one of these recurrent illusions that humans keep struggling with is different flavors of individualism versus collectivism. Mm-hmm. And obviously Atlas Shrugged makes a very strong case against collectivism. What is it that's so appealing about collectivism that, I guess first we should probably try to define these things a little bit for people that might not understand them, but what is it that's so appealing about collectivism that we keep deceiving ourselves individually and collectively to believe that these things are possible?
Yeah. Well, I guess to a basic definition, individual upholds that man should live for himself. Collectivism upholds that man should live for others, for the group, for the crowd. Mm-hmm. And I think what's so appealing, particularly with the collective consciousness today about collectivism, is that it provides people with an evasion of self-responsibility. Ultimately, collectivism upholds that each man should receive according to his need, not according to his ability.
Right.
And to the human being that wants to evade productive effort, that is extremely appealing. Yes, please, someone else come look after me. Yes, please, someone else comfort me. Yes, please, someone else be at my convenience. I'm happy to wash my hands of responsibility with my life, with filling my cup, with living a meaningful and purposeful existence. And I think, that's ultimately the magnet, is that someone else can hold me on this journey. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't support each other. True support, in my opinion, comes from real individualism, because it comes from this notion of rational selfishness. It's in my self-interest to want to help you, to want to do something with you. But when this becomes the blanket code of morality, then no one genuinely wants to support anyone, because everyone's cups are completely depleted, and we're all giving from a place of resentment, from obligation.
Yeah.
And energetically, that's not good for anyone. There's all these expectations. It's not that. So I think it's, I've built myself up. I've become a productive human being. I've become a man of value. And from this place, I genuinely want to give to someone else. I do want to support you, my wife, my kids. Like, it's in my self-interest to sacrifice for my kids. I'm not saying sacrifice is a bad thing, but where's it coming from?
Right. Yeah, that's a great point too. That's collectivism, right? Like, in your family, you're not running a capitalist society with your kids. You're not charging them for every sandwich. You're giving the shirt off your back, the fruits of your labor, to take care of your kids. That works at the family scale, but I guess the deception comes is when politicians and demagogues, they try to represent, oh, let's all be one big family, right? The motherland or the fatherland or whatever romantic lie is being told, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need, as you said.
Yeah.
I guess it sort of exacerbates the problem, because you have people that have a natural compassion. Like, it sounds great to believe that if we could all just be one big happy family, that sounds wonderful. But we see in practical implementation, it does not work, right? People need prices and markets and rule of law, all these things to resolve disputes, because we're not all one big family, right? We're a bunch of families.
Yeah, man.
But it exacerbates that problem when you have self-interested people trying to use these lies or hide behind these lies to then steal from people, right? To, push socialism or push Marxism or push communism. And you get people to believe that this reality is possible where we can all be one big happy family, but that's just used as like a veil so you can violate their property or worse,
It's always at the sacrifice of someone. People think, like money just comes out of thin air, or, government incentives just come out of thin air. Like,
right.
it's not the case, So I think ultimately, like as Rand says, collectivism upholds the notion that man is a sacrificial an animal,
Right.
that his interests are secondary, and the purpose of his life, is not to further life. It's not to live. It's not to become valuable. It's not to reach potential. It's to sacrifice for the other. It's to become a nothing.
Right.
And that's simply not a code of ethics or a morality, as we see when we look around us, that, leads to a thriving society. One of the biggest, I guess, collectivist catchphrases, especially these days, is like, for the greater good, right?
Yes.
Now, ultimately, I want the greater good. That's what I want. And we had this conversation with G. Edward Griffin on our podcast. And what he says is, but what's the method to achieve the greater good?
Right.
And ultimately, I agree with him that the path is individualism. It's by each individual acting in their own self-interest without inhibiting upon the inalienable rights of others, always honoring the law of freedom. And ultimately, that leads for greater group prosperity than the inversion that is collectivism, altruism.
Yeah. That's great. That's a great point. This false God, right? The greater good, the good of society. It's always invoked, right? That you, the individual, need to sacrifice whatever, money, wealth, time, property, to this ephemeral, amorphous greater good. It's just, it's not even defined. It's just like whatever the demagogue defines as the greater good. And it's
well, ultimately, people think there is a collective group interest in the greater good. There's not. The group interest is based upon the individual who holds the most power within that collective.
Yes.
It's their interest.
Yes. That's where I was going with that, is like, because again, back to truth, like, what is the truth? Well, the truth is society is comprised of individuals.
Yeah.
So it's oxymoronic to say, oh, let's violate the individual's rights for the good of society. Like, you're taking a lower resolution view on the world, society, or the greater good, and saying let's violate its elementary particle to try and improve it. Like, it's like, let's destroy the atom to improve the apple or something. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
It's ridiculous. And collectivists often, like, always harp on about, looking after minorities. But as Rand said, the smallest minority on earth is the individual.
Yes. There can be no smaller.
Oh.
And the one that really, this shook me a lot over the past few years, because you think we've gotten past that. Like, how many bodies did we need to stack up in the 20th century to understand that from each according to their ability, to each according to their need doesn't work, right? Like, it's a false God. But then we start hearing things like, nobody is safe until everybody is safe. Right. Another one of these. Own nothing. It's and then it works. It works on the minds of the young, especially, I guess, because they just look out on the world and think, well, yeah, things are really screwed up.
Well, because we've been programmed to believe that we live in a capitalist society,
right?
when we don't. So people think the fruits of what we're seeing is a result of capitalism, when really they've got no freaking idea what capitalism means.
Right. It's not late stage capitalism, it's late stage central banking.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking at in the world. I can't recommend Atlas Shrugged highly enough, honestly. Like anyone who's listening to this, go get that audiobook. It is, I mean, it's a fictional story, but it is like, especially if you listen to it right now, you'll perfectly understand everything that's happening. I don't want to say everything that's happening in the world, but you'll get a good grip on what's going on by going through that book.
Yeah, man, it could have been written today and still be as relevant. You know, and it's incredible that, you know, she was, you know, ultimately English wasn't even her first language. Right. And she came and she created a fully complete close-ended philosophy in objectivism and had the creativity to actually portray that in like 1,000+ page fictional story. And in my opinion, one of the greatest stories of all time, you know, like it's insane.
Yeah, quite an unbelievably talented woman. And the only thing I'd read of hers prior to that was her essay, The Virtue of Selfishness. Now, how do we, this is a tricky one too. Like, how do you articulate the value or even the morality of rational selfishness to people that aren't familiar with these ideas? Because on the surface, to say that sounds selfish, right? It sounds like a negative thing. And, you know, selflessness sounds like a better, more moral thing, but that's a very slippery slope towards the greater good, like we were just describing. So how do you articulate the value of, or even the morality of rational selfishness?
Yeah, man. And again, like it comes to the distortion of these words, you know, like capitalism, like there's so much muck that comes with that now, like selfish. There's so much, you know, imagery embedded in that word in people's mind through so much programming and conditioning, you know, like selfish, greedy, you know, corporate brutes, etc. But you know, we've got to get back to what the word means, and it means to act in one's self-interest.
Right.
You know,
which is truth, by the way. Like we're all doing it all the time.
Yeah, man. So it's like the question is, do you value your life? Do you value your existence? And for the individual that answers yes, then ultimately that person is rationally selfish. They make decisions and actions in accordance with the furtherance of one's own life. And that's how all of nature operates. You know, the plant is going to, you know, grow closer towards the sun to get more sunlight and automatically dig towards more fertile soil. It's not going to think twice about acting in its own interest in the furtherance and preservation of its own life. The animal isn't going to think twice to eat, to kill, to do what's necessary. But man is separate. He's the only species that has a volitional consciousness, right? So we can choose to act against our own self-interest. And ultimately, Rand would call that evil, because in her philosophy, objectivism, which in my understanding of it, very much so, you know, is natural law, right? What she's saying is that, you know, life begets life. All of life in all of nature, you know, we're moving towards more life, except man, for some reason, you know, is able to not do that. He's able to make the choice against that. So I guess to answer your question, if you value your life, if you value your existence, if you value your potential, if you value freedom, then, you know, you are rationally selfish. And that doesn't mean that you're going to compromise those for anyone else, because this is the person who truly values freedom. So the last thing on their mind is to value the inalienable individual rights of another, because they recognize that that is the breeding ground for everything great, for all of value, for all of productivity, for the ability, for the creative life force flowing through my bones to create something out of nothing. You know, freedom is what allows that to be the case.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's tricky because again, that word, the words, always the words kind of get loaded with this emotional weight. And I think the way I try and frame this in my own mind is, you hear phrases like greedy capitalist thrown around a lot, but I think you could draw a line between greed and self-interestedness. And that line is, well, did you engage in consensual exchange, like the consensual exchange of private property with someone, or did you steal their private property? If you stole it, that's greedy. If you engaged in consensual exchange, then that's just self-interestedness. And so we want people engaging in consensual trade and maximizing their self-interest or selfishness, if we want to use that term. But we don't want greed, right? We don't want people stealing from each other and killing each other, things like this. And as you were saying that too, this kind of like devil's advocate argument came up in my mind that I guess socialists, people that advocate for aggressing against private property, right, for the greater good or for society, they could perhaps argue that those individuals are actually acting in their own rational self-interest, that, oh, I have the ability to deceive and steal from other people, so I should just go do that to improve my own position. But again, I'd go back to Atlas Shrugged, is like, she demonstrates what happens when you violate that basic morality. When you start treating people like a means to an end, like we collapse, like civilization collapses basically.
And this actually harkens back to, you know, our earlier conversation that we were having. You know, is it in one's self-interest to act in accordance with the truth, particularly when through experience you understand the consequences of not acting in accordance with the truth.
Right.
So for me, doing that is not in my rational self-interest by any means.
That's right.
I'm gonna pay as a result of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great point. So it's an unenlightened rationality. It's irrational, basically, because
it is irrational. Yeah, it's anti-life.
Yes. That's such a good point. Okay, let's talk about this. This is another real tricky word. We love these tricky words. Value. People throw this one around a lot. Like, how would you define value? And then what do you think, what things are truly valuable in life?
Well, I mean, to me, this was intrinsically tied to the conversation that we just had, you know, and for me, the foundation of it is your existence, your survival. That is the bedrock of value, and no other values are possible if you are not a living, surviving human being. It can't exist. And like, values can only exist for living organisms. An indestructible, inanimate object cannot possibly have values. There's no metric for it to have value.
Right.
You know, so life is first and foremost the ultimate value, and then it builds upon there what's valuable to you as a unique human being in terms of what you actually want out of life, living in accordance with your own highest ideals, you know, your own interests, your own passions, your own desires. But life, survival, is the bedrock of value.
Yes. No, that's a great point. There's a good tie here to Austrian economics, where they say all action is an expression of value, right? So when you walk across the room, you are expressing the truth that you valued being on the other side of the room rather than where you originated from. And just to unpack the word action, you know, it's the purposeful use of means to pursue ends. And so that's, you know, Mises, the axiom of action, he calls it, right? Man must act, that we're always doing it. You can't not do it, actually. Everything you do, you're expressing value, you're expressing purpose, you're using means to pursue ends. And the reason it's axiomatic is because to even try and refute the axiom of action is to invoke argumentation as a means to the end of refuting the axiom. So it's like self-contained, irrefutable thing. And again, it's back to rationality, because only rational humans can act, right? That we purposefully select means to pursue ends.
Yeah, well, if you're
not alive, you can't do that, to your point, right? Like, it is, you got to be alive first, and then be rational, and then you can act.
Exactly. To live, one must act, you know?
Yes.
So if being alive is of rational self-interest, then so is action. And, you know, one can't act without thinking. So I would include thinking in that. One must think. To live, one must think. One must use their mind.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, like, proliferating all around us. You know, there's a war on the mind that's taking place. So many anti-mind ideologies propping up all over the place. And again, this harkens back to man's unconscious desire to escape from self-responsibility, because maybe on a deep unconscious level, like, he fears that he actually doesn't want freedom. You know, I think unconsciously many people carry the desire to return to a womb-like state of living. And again, to me, this is what probably gives rise to, you know, collectivist ideologies in many ways. We just want to go to the warm space bubble. You know, we fear having left the nest. We fear having left safety and comfort. We fear leaving the tribe.
Yeah.
So anything that, you know, can release some of the burden, quote unquote, that these people may perceive it as is going to be considered something that's good.
Yeah.
Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Wasabi Wallet. With Wasabi Wallet, you can receive, send, and store Bitcoin privately. In Wasabi Wallet, your transaction history and wallet balance are completely hidden. Wasabi Wallet is easy to use, all of its privacy features are built in by default, and it works with any amount of Bitcoin. Wasabi users can make CoinJoin transactions together with BTC Pay server users or Trezor Suite users. For BTC Pay server users, they can make payments directly inside of a CoinJoin, and for Trezor Suite users, you can make CoinJoins directly on a hardware wallet. These features result in fee savings and security improvements for both sets of users. So go to wasabiwallet.io today to download the state-of-the-art Bitcoin privacy wallet. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Casa. Casa makes it simple to buy and secure your Bitcoin without wondering whether you're doing it right. Specifically, Casa provides a multi-key custody solution, which is by far the most secure way to custody your Bitcoin. Now, when I talk about Bitcoin being theft-proof money or inviolable private property, a multi-key custody model is exactly what I am talking about. Using multiple keys lets you maintain full control of your Bitcoin while also giving you redundancy in case you lose one of the keys. It's also the best way to secure your Bitcoin for inheritance planning purposes. So go to keys.casa, that's C-A-S-A, today to sign up and use discount code BREEDLOVE.
Maybe this is a good segue actually into the new age dogmas and ideologies you mentioned earlier. That maybe they are little containers for relieving this fear or stress that you're describing. What are these? What are these new age dogmas and ideologies, and what are they rooted in your estimation?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess particularly in I guess the communities and circles that, I guess our podcast more lies within, many people on a quote unquote truth seeking path initially, I believe, and this is also the case with me experientially, get magnetized towards more of a new age or pop version of spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, ultimately, the tenets of new age thought is that, you are not a self, you are not your body, you are not your mind, you are not your thoughts, etc., etc., etc. And this is ultimately, it's in my understanding and in my own personal experience, the antithesis of life, the antithesis of what it means to be alive. These ideas, I believe, came from the East. They were derived from Eastern philosophies. And it's rooted in two core pillars. And to me, those pillars are Gnosticism, which again is a very loaded word. But in my understanding, and to me, Gnosticism is basically this idea that we live in a fallen realm that needs to be escaped from. This is a fallen planet. Our bodies are evil, and we need to escape from our bodies. And everything that we do should be for some unknowable, unquantifiable future existence. And the other pillar is this whole notion of aestheticism, which ultimately, again, is self-sacrifice, is, I must deprive my body in order to achieve some kind of level of spirituality. Like the more that I abstain from worldly matter, from worldly things, from food, from sex, from whatever it might be, the closer that I can come to becoming like a true, spiritual on some level. And again, it's antithetical to life. To live, one must think, and I think we really need to reclaim congruence with our own minds and the power of our minds to actually live a prosperous existence. It's all rooted in escaping reality. Is where I come from with this.
Yeah, that one is tricky, I think, because it's almost like a matter of degree. Because obviously some degree of asceticism can be beneficial, right? Fasting or meditation or solitude, self-discipline, like these things can be useful, but taken to an extreme, right, where you're just trying to completely subordinate this life to some, as you said, unquantifiable afterlife, that's anti-life, right? That's irrational, basically.
Yeah, when it gets to the point of like, the deprivation, obviously that's not in one's self-interest. Again, if you can take somebody to an extent where it's healing and it's beneficial for you,
Mm-hmm.
then for sure. But even like, this is a common one, but like people sitting in ice baths beyond the point of regulation, to the point where they're
Right.
completely associated, shut off just to withstand this freezing cold temperature. That's not beneficial for you. It's
Right.
beneficial to a limit, to a degree. But if you're completely disassociated, you can't feel your body, you can't feel your nervous system whatsoever.
Right.
That's, I would put that into the aestheticism basket.
Yeah, it calls to mind that the medicine is the dosage, right? Like a
Yeah.
little bit of these things can be useful, but taken too far, too extreme can be poisonous.
Yeah.
Um,
And like the other thing that, I find New Age dogma and ideology is built upon, I guess one of the key, I guess, books, that fall in this category is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
oh yeah.
It's a book that
Yeah.
I've read. And,
Yeah.
at that time, I did experience a shift in consciousness as a result of it. But
Mm.
ultimately, it was because by cutting off the past and cutting off the future, I get to escape responsibility for all the choices that I've made in my life up until this
Mm.
point. I get
Mm.
to avoid my shadow. I get to avoid dealing with the
Mm.
consequences of my actions. I just live in the now. There is no future. There is no past. There is no mind. That
Right.
feels like bliss to someone
Yeah.
that's lived 35 years of hedonism. And that's
Right.
why you see so often these corporate types going from, big time jobs on Wall Street to all of a sudden wanting to sit on a mountaintop in the Ganges and become nothing,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
it gives them an escape from dealing with
Right.
the consequence of their actions thus far.
Yeah, that's a great point too. I loved that book, but it is, I mean, useful in one circumstance if you're trying to get kind of in a meditative, more present awareness. If you're constantly attached to the past or you're constantly worried about the future, then that shift can be useful. But it, again, you can't take that to an extreme either, because then you're just
Yeah.
dissociated from the past and not planning for the future.
Yeah, mindfulness is a tool. It's not a state of being.
Yeah.
It's useful to detach for a second and take a look at, the different compartmentalizations of the way we think, but
Mm-hmm.
you can't live there.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, we were talking about this offline. This quote came up that I wanted to share from Dan DePani, and I think it speaks to this, maybe the dangers of these new age dogmas or ideologies. He said that don't outsource your life to the universe. Take ownership of it. Your life, your responsibility. You hear a lot of people say things like, "Oh, everything happens for a reason," or a lot of people kind of have victim mentality, like, "Oh, this always happens to me." That you just get this defeatist attitude. In some, I don't want to, like, obviously we're generalizing here, and I'm not too much of a new age ideology expert, but I sense a lot of this defeatist attitude when I hear people sharing, and I think, yeah, you got to stay with the reality of responsibility, because that one does not go away. Like you're,
Dude, the attitude of it is what it is,
yeah,
is the reason that we have so many people who are trying to siphon our life force all around us, because we're in this state of passivity, this state of
yes,
pure acceptance, of pure surrender, right? Like there's no tension. We need a
yes,
level of tension. We need to be able to take responsibility for our own lives. We need to think things through properly. We need to take appropriate action,
yes,
to keep things in balance. And if we think, everything's just gonna be bliss and be great no matter what occurs, then that is saying, welcome, parasites, have me.
yes, yes,
I'm not interested in self-preservation. I'm not interested in wielding a sword. I'm not interested in climbing a mountain.
yeah,
It's like everything's just unfolding the way it's gonna unfold. But again, man, like it's giving up on that responsibility that comes with life.
absolutely. The tension, that's a really good word, because it's the tension is necessary for forward movement. Like you draw a bow, like, what are you doing? You're putting some tension on the
Yeah.
bowstring to launch the arrow forward. And so if everyone just takes that mentality, it is what it is, this is the way things are, blah blah blah, then no progress ever occurs. Right? We would not get to where we are today. We'd still be
Yeah.
building pyramids or living in serfdom, something like that, if we don't have that tension to move
Well,
forward.
we're able to be enslaved because of a lack of
Yes.
tension,
Right.
you know? And, if physically, even like I'm thinking of in like now another, iteration of this is like, yoga. Like yoga is good to a limit, But if you're going to be flexible to the point of complete flaccidity,
yes,
there's no tension in there.
Point. Yes.
You know?
Yeah, that's why you have to pair it. Like weight training pairs well with yoga, right? You get the yin and the yang, whatever you want to call it. It's a great point.
That's right.
Okay, I would be remiss, good sir, if I did not talk to you a little bit about the nature of money.
Mm-hmm.
What I guess we could focus on the programming and distortions people have in relation to money. Now, I would love to just ask you the question straight up, like, what is money in your view? And then what are these emotional, psychological dimensions of it that people experience in the world that we don't often talk about? It seems like it's a very taboo subject for a lot of people. Most people just seem like they don't have enough of it. Everyone wants more, which is pretty normal. But what are your views on the nature of money, and then how it's distorted in the modern day?
Yeah, well, I mean, in my estimation, to answer the question directly, what is money? It's the symbolic representation of life force exchanged. And so I'll come back to your question, but like when we think about like, Federal Reserve and fractional reserve banking, whatever it might be, like it's not really the value of the dollar that's being diluted, it's the value of your life force. That's being diluted. That's what's becoming less valuable as a result of that. That to me is the ultimate distortion. And when it comes to many of the, I guess, the programs and the corruptions around money, again, on some level, I come back to, religion. I don't believe money is the root of all evil. I don't even believe the love of money is the root of all evil. And I think, that is one key program that keeps many people in a state of poverty consciousness and scarcity consciousness. They're constantly unconsciously pushing it away because they believe if, they're seen to have it, or they're seen to, be doing well with it, then, they're going to be disapproved of by the tribe, so to speak. And, I see this being iterated, particularly, through Hollywood programming. We see many of the main characters, the wealthy, rich, successful characters, often are the corrupt ones, the evil ones, and Robin Hood syndrome, the martyr is always the hero, the person who's not interested in the material world. And so I think that has done a great deal in terms of distorting the way that we perceive money. But the way I see it, and again, leaning on Rand, it's like it's ultimately the representation of how much value you have on one's life and on one's mind and on one's productive ability. My ability to produce is directly correlated to the money that I earn. And so money is the incentivization for creative effort, for innovation, for life to continue to evolve and to grow. And looking at it from that perspective, I'm going to use the extreme just to make the point, but it could be argued that money is the root of all good.
Yeah. I mean, the world would be very less civilized without it, basically, right? It's a very important tool, like as essential as language or something.
It's our means of survival. Yes. It's our means of coming back to rational self-interest. It literally is our means of survival. Yes. In a hunter-gatherer scenario, the hunter that goes and forages and finds or kills his own food, that is his money in that scenario. That's his means of survival. Yes. And so if someone else comes along and wants to steal that or take it or compromise that on some level, then they're compromising his means of survival. And this brings us obviously to the converse of the, I guess the point of private property as well. But
sorry, go ahead.
No, I think I finished my point.
Okay. No, it's so good. And I love how symbolic representation of life force exchange. It's poetic almost. And there's this other thing too, where we keep coming back to rationality, and money is almost a way in which we extend human rationality into the material domain. And I mean that literally. Like when we talk what is a price? Again, it's an exchange ratio between goods denominated or expressed in money. So we're actually figuring out what things are worth in terms of other things, but we're speaking a common language of economic numeracy called money. It lets us rationalize about the world more effectively, right? I don't need to know how many chairs a table costs or how many cars a house costs. Like, we just talk in money and we can communicate very seamlessly about it, and we can trade and we can innovate and we can produce. So to your point, I don't know if it's the root of all good, but it is very foundational to productive effort and civilization. And like you said, when you dilute it, right, we're deviating from truth, we're distorting prices. We're also using that dilution to fund warfare, to fund mainstream media, psyops, like literally destroying life force. So if money is a symbolic representation for life force exchange, when we dilute it, we actually dilute life force in the real world, right? Bombs get dropped, production gets stymied, all of these things. We're actually destroying, or at least hamstringing, the human enterprise.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, if we look at like an objectivist morality and we say that, okay, that which furthers life is good, that which subverts life is evil, then, money is a motivator for the furtherance of life,
Yes.
and I guess that's where my statement kind of came from, in terms of, it can be us in some level described as a root of good. It's the reason we produce. It's the reason that we create value.
Yes.
It's because we're interested in our own survival. We're interested in our own prosperity. And so is all of nature.
Yes. Yeah. Fantastically said. And I have to give one more shout out to Atlas Shrugged here, because that money speech by, I think, Francisco D'Anconia, I think is his name.
Yeah.
Holy shit, man. It is so unbelievably good. Bro. It's the best descriptor of money I've ever heard.
Oh, man. I had goosebumps the whole way through that.
Yeah.
Crazy.
We're going to put it out on the show. Actually, I just read it from the book. It's probably 15 minutes long. And then I've got my animator putting a thing over the top of it. So I'm super excited to see what it looks like when it's done, but it is very, very, very good. Okay.
Again, like I come back to this point. It's like, if you're interested in your own life, if you value your life, if you value potential, if you value self-responsibility, read Atlas Shrugged.
Yes.
Like take that action. That's something that is going to be beneficial for your own rational self-interest.
I would dare to say it can't not change your life. If you actually read the whole thing or listen to the whole thing as I did, I don't think you can leave that book unchanged.
Yeah, I agree. It's a clean and scale for the mind.
Yes. Okay, so last question. I've kept you long enough. We've established the significance of money, let's say. What is the value of incorruptible money? What is the value of something like Bitcoin, money that we can't dilute? If diluting money is diluting life force in a literal sense, how important is money that cannot be diluted?
I mean, to have a store of value for one's life force, which can't be diluted. I mean, it's we never had that, number one.
Yeah.
And it's fundamental to, I think, ultimately human prosperity. And man, it's not something that I've really contemplated in much depth, but it's huge. It's absolutely huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very mystified by it, obviously. It's interesting. Maybe to some degree that human corruption is just a product of the incentive systems we've been inhabiting. And now we've developed an incentive system that really disincentivizes violence and coercion and rewards productive, fruitful human exchange, long-term relationships. So I'm very excited to see where it goes.
I mean, to make the analogy of, I guess, nature or earth, it is the most fertile soil imaginable for life to flourish.
Yes. I think that's a beautiful place to put a button on it.
Cool, man.
Joel, Really had a good time on this conversation. We'll have to do this again. Rapping philosophy with you is a lot of fun. Where can people find you and your podcast on the internet?
Yeah, man, bro, absolute pleasure being here. Our episode together is one of my favorites, The Truth About Money. People should definitely go check that out as well. The podcast is called Here for the Truth. Hereforthetruth.com. You can find everything you need there in regards to all our episodes, or you can search on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get podcasts. Here for the Truth. We have a membership community and a group coaching program as well, really helping people understand some of the concepts that we've discussed today. And you can find all that at hereforthetruth.com as well.
Awesome, dude. Great talking to you, and look forward to the next one.
Likewise, man. Take care.